the initial stages to do something requires a bit of effort, but it's not too bad. If you stick to it, have a rough plan, you're somewhat consistent, you'll get there. That one arm chin up, man, that's a different beast. So it
Yeah. All right, My Muscle Project, welcome back to another episode. Today, I am joined by Daniel Vadnal. If you don't know the name, you probably know the name of the YouTube channel, FitnessFAQs, or FitnessFAQs is also how it's pronounced as well. But I'm excited for this show because I want to hear the story. I've watched the video, the classic YouTube transformation video. I used to be skinny and weak, or not as in shape, and now look at me, I'm a beast. And it's one of the most extreme variations of this. So Dan, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Excited to chat.
Yeah, awesome. So I think that's honestly the best place to start. I mean, I've got a lot of questions, more specific gymnastics related questions, calisthenics stuff, but I think maybe probably the best place is start in the beginning, like how you kind of got into the training and the YouTube channel and the journey that it took you on, and where you are today.
Yeah, sure. So I actually started when I was 17 years old. So my initial introduction into, I guess, physical fitness was through parkour. So growing up, prior to being 17 years old, I wasn't really involved in any like organized sports or anything like that. So pretty much just your typical gamer kid, just after school playing games and whatnot.
Nice.
But found parkour, and that was the introduction into physical fitness. So through that, I mean, I enjoyed the elements of parkour, like the community, the training, the practice, all of that stuff. But after a while, what I found myself gravitating towards was more of the physical conditioning. So, a couple times a week, we'd be doing push-ups, pull-ups, dips, general exercises to improve our parkour capacity.
Right.
So that really helped to reinforce that, improving your physical abilities helped with your performance in parkour. But as you've probably seen, and most of the people listening have seen, with parkour, you get to a certain point where you go a little bit higher. You start doing jumps that are a little bit more, crazy and involved. So I found myself had to make a decision with what I wanted to do with my physical practice. And I just enjoyed doing the calisthenics stuff. So from there, being around 17 years old, I just transitioned more towards just training by myself or with a few friends that were into just fitness with pull-ups, push-ups, dips, and stuff like that. So that was just at various parks around my house. And over time with this, my community involvement with this was more online. So there was like different forums that you go on for calisthenics. But back in, the early days of being like 2008, 2009, there wasn't that much information out there. So someone like myself that was just starting out, there was no real guidance in terms of how to get better at handstands and the various calisthenics exercises. And as you probably know, that was the early days of YouTube. So I was looking up tutorials on how to do things, and I either couldn't find anything about what I wanted to learn, or I found that the tutorials weren't very helpful. So what I mean by that was, let's say I wanted to learn how to do a handstand. I'd go on how to do a handstand, and it would be some Olympian or some professional that's just like, okay, kick up into a handstand and do it.
Great instructions.
great instructions, like from A to Z real quick, 0 to 100.
Yeah.
And then just naturally over time, I don't, if you ask me now, I can't really explain why I produced a video or put something out there in that respect. But I just innocently, through my own research, synthesized a tutorial on how to do a handstand, as in how I'd like to learn it or be taught as a beginner. Received a bit of positive feedback. Who knows? Probably like 20 views and one comment that's like, "Good job, man. I like what you did."
Yeah.
But that was the initial spark that started the progression of the business that is FitnessFAQs.
Nice. That's awesome. Now, yeah, I want to, obviously there's two paths we can walk down here. Obviously the growth of YouTube and the business side of things, which we'll get to, but I want to start, more on the sort of the physical journey. I mean, some of the skills that you've achieved, it's one of those things that people look at and it's really hard to get a grasp on the level of, unless you've, experienced or done gymnastics or some kind of gymnastics training, even just to achieve some pretty basic skills. Takes a significant amount of time, and some of the skills you have are like, and when we talk to Dave Durante, like I mentioned to you, he's like, oh, that's a 5-year skill. Oh yeah, oh, that's a 10-year skill. Like, you're talking in years. So some of those skills, yeah, have taken you such a long time. So what was sort of the first? I mean, you mentioned the handstand, but from there, like, where did you decide? Okay, I want to do this, I want to do that, and then, what was some of, I guess, the lessons you started learning as you were approaching some of these more difficult skills?
Sure. I'd say that the initial exercise when people see calisthenics is the muscle up. That's essentially like the gateway exercise. If someone gets that, it just blows people's minds in terms of you're doing something that requires pretty much essentially all the pulling and pushing muscles in your upper body. You're moving your body through space, which is very gratifying.
Mm.
And it's not something that people can generally just do randomly. So you tend to have a base level of pulling strength, and then there's the actual skill component of being able to do the exercise itself. So for me, that was the first exercise that I worked towards, because I was just doing the general calisthenics exercises,
Mm-hmm.
but I couldn't do a muscle up to start with. So that was the first exercise where they required a strategic approach in terms of practice, consistency, rest, all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Nice. And that's the bar muscle up, not the ring muscle up?
Yeah, bar muscle up first.
Yeah, nice. And then how long, so how do you remember how long it took?
Not terribly long, because the reason I say that is not because I'm super impressive or anything gifted like that. As you can see from the early videos, it's because I stuck to the basics.
Mm.
What most people tend to make mistakes when it comes to any type of fitness, whether it's powerlifting, Olympic lifting, CrossFit, calisthenics, all that stuff, is they see people that have been doing it for a while, for years, and they're doing the flashy stuff, the flashy skills, but they don't see the foundation that was built. So fortunately, I had good guidance in terms of people that I was training with and just mentors at the time that were like, you need to be able to do this many pull-ups, this many dips, this many push-ups. What a lot of people do is they'll see calisthenics, see the muscle up, try it, but they can't do 5 pull-ups or 10 dips.
Yeah. Okay. And so do you have like a baseline sort of system of KPIs that you would work someone through? I mean, gymnastics traditionally has been very systematic in terms of, like, especially with Coach Summers' approach, from gymnastics bodies, it's like you will not do a ring row until you do like a hinge row sort of thing. So do you have something like that, some system that you've built for, say, the bar muscle up?
For the bar muscle up, there'd be just base level of requirements for that. But to make it more simple for the listeners to understand, it really depends on what exercise you're trying to do. So the base that you have will depend on the exercise that you're going for. So the advice that I'd give for someone doing a muscle up would be different to the advice that I'd be giving to someone who wants to learn a front lever, for example.
Right. And so let's just use the bar muscle up. I think it's a good example. It's obviously the skill that most people would like to achieve, and obviously it's very impressive. I reckon there's a lot of people listening to this, and I even speak for myself here, is like, can do 15 pull-ups, can do 25 dips, but can't do a bar muscle up. And they think, well, okay, but Dan, you said do all these things, I can do them. What piece am I missing now? I have like the requisite strength, but why can't I get myself over the bar? What is it that you find sort of like a missing piece there?
That's a really good example, because that's a situation most people find themselves in, with being able to do 10 plus pull-ups, have enough pushing strength, but they can't muscle up. This is where that specificity really comes in, not only in terms of, one, the power production. So there's a difference between being able to do 10 plus pull-ups to your chin and being able to do 3 to 5 to your chest or towards your belly button. So for someone in that position, they would just have to change their pulling training to go from more that moderate rep range, your conventional time under tension type of approach, to more explosive training specific for the muscle up.
Mm.
And number two with that would be just technique. So when you do pull-ups conventionally, you're just going in a vertical up and down pattern. When it comes to muscle ups, if you practice your explosive pull-ups in an arc motion, then you're going to be specifically replicating the demands of a muscle up. That's pretty much it.
And when you say arc, you mean the way your body's moving, like the glide kip? So you're swinging out and then kind of pulling.
Have to correct
backwards?
you. No
Okay.
no kipping on fitness FAQs,
Okay.
mate.
What is that motion then? What do you call that? That you call it arc? Is that what it's?
Yeah. So instead of pulling vertically like this, you'd be doing just pulling in more of a, over
Right.
type of arc in relation to the bar, like away and then towards.
So does someone have to set themselves up differently in that pull-up? Is it almost like you get to the top and you push away a little bit to start that sort of half moon process?
It's difficult to explain on audio like this, but probably the clearest way that I could explain it would be you want to keep it consecutive when you're pulling towards the bar and then coming down. When you return to a hanging position, keep your scap engaged. That way you can just keep it going essentially like a pendulum.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah. So there's like these subtle, like you said, specific differences when people are trying to boost up these skills. But before they even get to that stage, some of this prerequisite strength has to exist.
Yeah. And unfortunately, that's not the sexy stuff that sells these days. All the good coaches try to relay this information as much as possible. If we get people in with the flashy stuff, I hope that other coaches have the responsibility to really stress those fundamentals, because that means everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting because like the reason, or at least, I mean, you can probably speak to this as well. You're probably a part of this. Is that the reason calisthenics and gymnastics training became so popular is because of the flashy stuff, right? But then it's almost like, all right, we've brought you in with the stuff that you want and that you've seen, but now here's all the boring stuff that we didn't show you that you actually have to do if you want to get these skills.
Yeah, correct. I think that's just the way that the internet, advertising, all that works these days. It's like we have to play the game, so to speak. But I mean, once we have people's attention, then you can keep them there for the substance. Similar with what you guys do with your podcast here, My Muscle Project. It's like, sure, you might use a attention grabbing title. Everyone does. But I guess once people are in, they get the meat and potatoes, the substance, and they stick around for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so still on this skill progression thing. So bar muscle ups sound like one of the earlier skills that you started to get. Obviously, I don't know how you thought about it, but I think how most people think about it is what I just call confidence through competence. So as they unlock one skill, they then go, okay, well, I actually think I can get that next skill. Whereas, on day one, they're not like, I'll definitely be able to planche very soon. And they kind of, I guess, maybe set their expectations in the wrong place. Was there a couple of skills you can think of along the way that you were like, man, if I just could, that's like my dream skill? And then like, what was that? Talk me through that feeling of maybe with some of those skills, what it was like to finally get there.
I'll give you two examples.
Okay.
The planche and the one arm chin up.
Okay.
So I'll start with the one arm chin up first. I always found that such a cool exercise, because it's like when you first start out, you see pull-ups and chin-ups. You're like, whoa, that's a pretty tough exercise. Then you do a few, and like you said, you develop some competence. But then you get to a point where you're busting out more than 10, 12, and you want to look for that next step. But like most things in life, the initial stages to do something requires a bit of effort, but it's not too bad. If you stick to it, have a rough plan, you're somewhat consistent, you'll get there. That one arm chin up, man, that's a different beast. So it not only requires a lot of consistency, it requires a lot of patience too, for two reasons. It takes time to build the strength on one arm. It also requires patience in the sense of not getting too excited when you start to see results. So what a lot of people experience, myself included, is you see strength gain, but then your connective tissues aren't tolerating that load as much as you're psychologically pushing your body, so to speak. So I'd be making good progress with the exercise, getting stronger, getting close to getting it, but then getting injured. So getting golfer's elbow tendinopathy, having to be sensible and use a strict plan. But over a while, it teaches you a lot of lessons in the respect of what you should do, what you shouldn't do, and just learning that patience through through trial and in the trenches experience. But for me, seeing that exercise done was absolutely essential before I ever achieved it. So if someone was to just say to me, Daniel, there's people out there that can do a chin up on one arm, I'd be like, mate, that's absolutely crazy. That's like, I'm struggling to do like 10 with my body weight. That's just insane. But it's like, if you surround yourself in a good, positive environment where people are uplifting, there's a good culture, it just raises the standards. So through me initially thinking this is going to be tough, I'm not sure if I can do it, to eventually being able to achieve 5 reps on both arms at 6 foot tall and around 84-ish kilos, it still surprised me to even say it, because I know what it took in order to achieve that. And a very similar thing with the planche, as I just said before, that exercise significantly harder than one arm chin up for me personally, just because I find people have different strengths and weaknesses based on their anthropometry, so like their different limb lengths, etc. For me, the planche was an absolute beast, because I guess what I pride myself and what I teach through FitnessFAQs is trying to train in a holistic way. And I don't want to use that word holistic in a hippie way, because I know people could conceive it as that. What I mean is trying to train a few things at once. So what happens with a lot of people with calisthenics is they'll just do calisthenics, which is fine. It's like everyone chooses what they want to do with their training. But I guess what I was trying to get across is having the best of all worlds. So training for the planche when you're over 6 foot, and don't skip leg day. You just need to know the basics of physics to understand how that impacts leverages and whatnot.
Yeah, all you have to know is like just do some L-sit training without shoes, and then do it with shoes. And it doesn't even have to be like, Timberlands. It could just be a pair of Vans, like some light, thin shoes, and it's a significant difference. Now add 10 kilos of leg mass and an extra half a foot. It's a lot different.
And I think that's what's been so well received with FitnessFAQs, is that we're combining a few different training philosophies, so to speak. So if I could summarize it to those that are hearing about FitnessFAQs for the first time through the podcast, it's essentially to be strong like a gymnast, look like a bodybuilder, and have the mobility to move freely.
That's good. I like that. Yeah, I mean, that's probably the one thing that if anything kind of scares people off a little bit from calisthenics training, is like, oh, I'm not training legs. Like these guys, they do all these skills and they're wearing pants the whole time. And I know there's nothing underneath those pants. I get it. Like sometimes it is a disadvantage to have, leg training. But unless you're trying to be the best calisthenics acrobat performer at the Fitness Expo, like you probably want a set of legs walking around. So it's good to know that you're training that. And I do want to get to that in a sec, but just coming back to some of the skills. So how long, I mean, this is always a tough question. You've been around obviously some high performing athletes that do a similar training method to you. And so you've probably discussed timelines, or how long did it take you to get X and how long did it take you to get Y. And I guess you kind of build out these kind of ballpark figures for like really talented, exceptional athletes that, maybe are really built for it. Someone built more like a gymnast, shorter, more compact, lots of pulling strength, good attachments, the biceps, lats, all that sort of stuff. What do they generally expect, or how do the best athletes normally approach going from the pull up to the one arm pull up? What's sort of the time frame? And then someone who's, working with a heavier, longer body that's less inclined to gymnastics and this sort of stuff. What was your timeline, and I don't know, where do you put yourself on that timeline? Is average, below average, above average?
Sure, that's a lot of questions, man. I'm trying to
sorry,
I'm trying to assimilate that first thing in the morning.
Sorry.
No, I gotcha. I'd say the greater someone's foundation is, like you said, in terms of if they're more genetically gifted and have a good base already, they're going to experience pretty rapid progress within 1 year. For most other people, you're looking at seeing realistic progress within that 1 to 3 year time frame. If you're consistent and preventing or minimizing as much injury as possible. And I would say for me, I probably fall on the spectrum of the more average response to training, probably because I'm juggling so many things. Because when you're training legs authentically, as you know, and deadlifting, that's quite a neural load on the body. And especially if you're doing mobility practice that involves weights into different positions and ranges of motions, that's essentially strength training as well. I'd say I'm more on that average response. And that's something that people should become aware of if they want to juggle a few things. You're not going to progress as fast or to the extent as someone who just does calisthenics. There's a reason why there's specialists and generalists. You just need to come to terms with what approach you're taking and have peace with it. Because I see a lot of people either trying to be generalists and frustrated with their progress rate, or they're specializing, but then they're like, oh, but I've got skinny legs, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's well said. And then I guess really the thing that's getting in the way for a lot of people is injury, right? Now you mentioned you study physiotherapy. You obviously understand how injury works. How much do you allow yourself to get some kind of niggle to the point where you go, okay, now it's too much? Because with all high level training, regardless of what domain it is, there's always something. If you've done it long enough, there's always a little bit, but you tolerate a certain amount before you're like, okay, no, now this is too much and now I need to pull it back. So let's use the one arm pull up journey, because obviously that, mentioned golfer's elbow. I think anyone that's ever, done a significant amount of pull ups or volume, it's like one of the first things to come. How did you kind of manage that, those tendon issues and injury through the process of, in this instance, getting the one arm pull up?
I can give you two answers to that. One,
Okay.
when I was younger and more naive. So like everyone else, just absolutely love training. I love everything involved with it. And in that time would probably be continuing to the point of it severely affecting my output where I was forced to not do it. So it's like you'd be training, you're pulling so much that literally body weight reps to warm up would be uncomfortable. So then in that case, previously when I was a teenager or very early 20s, just my passion exceeded my reasoning capacity. But these days, as I've got more to lose, I've got more responsibility, I've got to be healthy and being able to demonstrate for the various content. It's beyond my personal desire for just enjoying training. It's so much more than that. And I had such good advice by my brother, actually, Andrew, who helps out with FitnessFAQs on a project basis. He's like, there's no need to be world class. You just have to have a respectable level and being able to authentically practice what you preach. If you can do one arm chin up, that's already crazy. Why do you have to do 5 to 10? It's just the ego, so to speak. And it's like, that was the biggest realization for me a few years ago, especially when you're in a similar position, such as yourself. When you're creating content, it's a fine line. There's no need to go absolutely crazy, because you can add value and substance in other ways. If that's all you've got to offer, for me, that's not something that I wanted to be. So yeah, focusing on other areas so I can help more people and just taking it a bit easier so I don't go crazy with the training.
Yeah, that's good. And then in the case of treating an injury specifically, let's just use golfer's elbow as a good example. There's obviously multiple factors involved here. Obviously, it's the amount of volume of training that you're doing versus also the rehab training and the rest and all that sort of stuff and balancing it. What have you found to be, I guess, a tried and true formula, at least on yourself or maybe some clients or something that you've worked with, that is like kind of a good approach to treating some kind of ongoing sort of tendon issue?
Prevent in the first place. Load management is absolutely huge. You speak to any health professional, they will say first and foremost, that's the biggest thing. So stepwise progressive overload in a sustainable way is absolutely key. For most people, they'll think twice a week pulling for one arm chin up, surely that's not enough. It's plenty. You want to eke out as much progress from as little for as long as possible. So most people make the mistake of they get passionate about training. If twice a week's working, why not try 4 to 5?
Why not 10?
Why not 10? No rest days. Yeah. So I'd say, man, beyond everything, that's probably the most succinct answer I can give. And it's one that is going to help the most people is just monitor your training loads, progressively overload in a sustainable way. And don't worry about all the superfluous modalities like massage and hot therapy and acupuncture and stuff. They're transient at best. You want to get to the root, which is that training load. That's the best approach.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, okay, so coming back to your sort of training method that you mentioned before, look like a bodybuilder, all that sort of stuff. One of the things that was really apparent with your transformation over the years was you were actually quite jacked going into it. You didn't look how you look now, but you had a lot of muscle mass going into it. What sort of training were you doing before you started your calisthenics journey?
Like I said, it was just the parkour stuff and
Okay.
general body weight exercises.
Okay. And so you actually got, now this is one of those things where I think there's a bit of, I mean, there's not a lot of evidence to prove it, but it's more anecdote. It's like, okay, if you're doing lots of body weight strength training, then versus say if you were doing to bodybuilding training, in a way, you're still training the biceps, you're still training the same muscle groups or whatever, but your body I forget what the terms are, but obviously one thing you're pulling weights towards you, and the other thing is you're using your body as the weight, and how your body is responding to it. It needs to know, okay, if I want to pull this skill off, I might have to get a little bit lighter here. Did you notice that your body changed without changing your nutrition? This is sort of a nutrition question. Or did you actually, once you started doing more of the calisthenic stuff, you're like, okay, I actually need to be lighter here. I need to eat differently. Or was your body just changing regardless of nutrition, just from going into more calisthenic stuff?
Well, fortunately, with what we know with hypertrophy or muscle building, it's quite non-specific in the respect of the exercise doesn't particularly matter. Muscles respond to tension, progressive tension. So whether that's through a more closed kinetic chain exercise, which is what you're referring to with body weight exercise, like push up, hands are fixed on the floor, body moves, versus a open kinetic chain bench press where the hands move and the body's fixed, the body doesn't really know the difference. So as long as if you're training with an adequate intensity relative to muscular failure or RPE, close to 10, then the body has no choice but to go through that muscle tear, degeneration, regeneration process. So I guess fortunately, I always had just such passion for training and effort relative to what I was doing that if I applied that to body weight or weight training, I would have probably got a similar response. So those listening, don't really concern yourself if you are choosing to do body weight or choosing to do weight. As long as if you're following those principles of progressive overload, you're going to build muscle. But like you said, the nutrition element is key as well. This is a topic, as I'm sure you've probably discussed hundreds of times on your podcast with different views from different experts. It's a very complicated topic, but I think at the root of it, if you're in that calorie surplus, you have adequate protein relative to your body mass, and you're applying progressive overload, you're going to be building muscle.
Yeah. So the recomping that happened in your body specifically, because I don't think, maybe I got this wrong, but your weight didn't change a whole lot, but obviously visually you changed dramatically.
Yeah, right. So initially I weighed, I think it was 74 kilos when I first started like parkour and stuff.
Yeah.
These days I'm sitting around 83 to 84 kilos.
Okay.
So this just goes to show for people that are listening that you're not going to build a tremendous amount of muscle. It's not like the early days of the muscle magazines where it's like you're going to pack on like 40 kilos of lean mass if you eat this and that. But it's going to have a physique that looks very aesthetically pleasing, and the scale's not particularly important.
Yeah, nice. And I think in a way as well, through the training, because it's, you're acquiring certain skills, the body is balancing out in terms of where it's, what muscles are developing and in good balance. Whereas what bodybuilders or bodybuilding or split routine training often falls victim to is that because there's so much isolation, you can create a lot of imbalances, right? You get a lot of forward shoulder, massive pecs, massive delts, but no rear delts, right? No upper back muscles. And I guess that's one of the main advantages. You don't really have to worry about that as much when you're going for these skills, because your body will figure out that it needs these areas. And yes, you can get a bit more specific and bring up certain areas as you need, but ultimately you're going to build a more balanced structure.
Yeah, you nailed it. As you said, it's taking care of all the fundamental patterns of vertical and horizontal pulling and pushing. You're going to train the body as a whole, which is what's so fantastic about calisthenics at its core, is that it hits all of those areas. And what people that do calisthenics experience is how honest this training style keeps you. So what I mean by that is, the leaner you are and the less body fat that you have, obviously the easier it's going to be to pull and push your own body weight. So it's that fine line of when you're trying to, I guess, develop aesthetics, not letting yourself get too heavy so that your calisthenics doesn't suffer. So that keeps you honest.
And then, yeah, that was kind of what I was leaning into as well, was like, when you're focusing on aesthetics versus focusing on a skill, are you actually switching your intention? Are you like, all right, well, I'm going to do some calisthenics training today and train my biceps. I'm going to do ring row curls and, banded curls and pull ups to grow my biceps. Or are you always just progressing to the next skill and your body just develops aesthetically along the way?
Programming is a really complex topic, but I don't want to give you no response. I know how frustrating that is when you listen to a podcast. I would say my recommendation for people is prioritize early on in your session what is most important to you. And my general advice would be skills and strength first. So doing like your front lever, your planche, your one arm pull-up stuff, those different goals early in your session. And then you can finish with the hypertrophy and pump and fluff stuff. So it's not dissimilar to a lot of other general, I guess, like power building approaches, but just with calisthenics.
Yeah, nice. Now, one of the topics that I actually spoke at length with Dave when we had him on was core training, and something I wanted to get your thoughts on. Now, he had a program in his app where you do like 365 days and you do like a 20-minute core workout each day. And there's a lot of different things that I learned. I only did about 70 days. But yeah, I wanted to get maybe your thoughts on core training, because on the surface in a lot of stuff, people see the L sits, they see like the hanging windmills and that sort of stuff, but I feel like they miss some really fundamental exercises that maybe are not as sexy and don't look as good on Instagram. So what are some of your philosophy and training around training the core?
With calisthenics, it's not as important as people might believe on the surface level. People will see a planche or a front lever where your body is being held horizontal, and they think, wow, that demands a lot of core strength because you're holding yourself rigid. With calisthenics, it's predominantly scapular strength, which tends to be the limiting factor. So if you see someone that's doing a planche and their back arches, that's generally a manifestation of their shoulder and scapular strength being insufficient. If they're doing a front lever and their hips are sagging, same thing. An easy way that you can test this to believe it is if you were just to lie on a bench, if you can stay there in like a basic dish shape, you've got sufficient core strength to hold yourself in that position. That's why my general recommendation is 80% of your training from start to the finish of the session should be on those main strength objectives. And then if you want to finish with core stuff as more of an accessory, be it for just general strength or perhaps partial hypertrophy of the abs, that's when you'd put it in at the end. And the best two, I guess, bang for your buck exercises for people doing bodyweight stuff would be some type of anti-extension movement, such as a plank, ab wheel rollout, something like that, or just something that involves hip flexor strength, like a hanging knee or hanging leg raise.
Okay, so if anything, people are putting too much emphasis on core. They think they need to train it more and harder than they actually need to.
And it's the type of thing, we've only got so much energy to give in a session. As much as we'd we all enjoy training. We want to spend a few, hours even doing it several times a week. We all know that after that hour, maybe hour and a half max, if you're training properly, you're going to be pretty fatigued. So you want to choose the right exercise and not really, like you said, I guess, waste energy or waste time on stuff that's not going to feed in directly to your goals.
Yeah, that's good. Now, moving over to the mobility component that you mentioned, obviously being flexible, having good range of motion. I just obviously think it's one of the starting points to anyone's journey, especially, if they're really limited, can't touch their toes, can't, sit up straight without supporting themselves on the ground with legs out in front of them, just basic stuff like that. Yet most people go, oh, I know I need to stretch. And, what's started popping up around here recently in Sydney, I don't know if you've got these where you are, but it's like stretch studio. Like you go in, they strap you down to a table and someone just stretches you out for an hour. It's like the most stupid thing ever. If you know anything about stretching, you're not going to get a return on those. It's going to be a temporary relief. You're going to get out. You're going to feel good for 20 minutes. Everything's going to reset. But what are your go-tos with mobility? What's your general philosophy around it? And what kind of structure do you stick to?
Sure. I think it's very important. And this conversation happens all the time with anyone that's been training for, say, more than 3 years, is they tend to go the path of either training purely for strength, purely for size, and that tends to have its deficits. So what tends to happen is, let's just say someone that's purely interested in aesthetics, they'll start and they'll change their physique. And after a few years, you tend to get to a ceiling of your potential. You're not going to change that much, and it's going to take a really long time to change. So the training gets boring, and they're like, okay, it's not all about looks anymore, so I'm going to train for strength. Then they start strength training and doing 1 to 3 rep maxes, and they either get burnt out, lose enjoyment, or experience more injury. And this is frustrating because people tend to be pure black and white for things like, oh, I'm a bodybuilder, or I'm a power lifter, because they want to get really good at it. But from my experience with coaching and speaking to many people, it tends to leave people feeling a bit empty in the respect that something's missing. So like you said, you pointed out and highlighted that mobility is a very key component. And mobility, for those listening, could just purely be defined as being able to move and control your body into different positions. So the squat would be a mobility exercise because you're actively having to get into that position. It requires your muscles to do work. So this is why I'm so passionate about fitness FAQs, because this is what I'm trying to bridge the gap with it not being purely about one thing. It's not just about the looks. It's not just about the strength. It's not just about the mobility and flexibility. It's about having a decent amount of everything. Because even those that get into mobility and flexibility, why it turns off people that do strength or aesthetic training is because they look at people that are mobile and they're like, oh, they look skinny, emaciated. They've got no muscle. They can't really do anything. They just like fold passively into positions. So yeah, trying to get across that you can have your cake and eat it too. But you're probably not going to be the best in the world at each of those, but you're going to have a very respectable physique, respectable strength level, and respectable range. So to answer your question with my approach to mobility, I'm very big on active stuff. So static, passive stretching doesn't serve a big component of what I teach with mobility stuff. It's more about what position do you want to get in, go through that range of motion with load, no different to what you do with any other exercise. So a great example that I can give, which is what you spoke about earlier, was the people couldn't touch their toes. So the classic example that we use in calisthenics, gymnastics, whatever, is Jefferson curl. So it's essentially the movement loaded, and it's nothing fancy. You just use a weight to put you through that position, take your joints through that range of motion, stretch and strengthen your muscles in that range, and progressively overload it.
Yeah, the Jefferson curl, if anyone's ever seen it at like someone doing it with their body weight, it's it looks pretty scary. I think people think they're going to snap, but no, it's progressive overload. Don't worry, folks. He knows what he's doing.
The problem is, like everything on the internet, it's always extremes, right?
Mm.
The Jefferson curl wouldn't be seen as so dangerous if people did it with like 2.5 to 5 kilos, something realistic that you can articulate every part of your spine through a full range of motion and not scare your body. But the problem is people go on the internet and they see old mate on Instagram doing bloody 80 or 100 kilo Jefferson curl that he's probably done for 10 years, building up to that. It's crazy.
Yeah. No, 100%. And it's one of those exercises that, at that sort of weight, it looks fucked up. It looks like it's about to die. Like it looks like extreme danger levels for sure. But I think, to your point with having your cake and eat it too, one of the best examples I would say I would point people towards when it comes to like flexibility training is Juji Mufu, who like definitely proved to a lot of people that you can look like you are just this swollen bodybuilder / strongman guy, but at the same time can do, the Van Damme splits, which is, extremely impressive. And it's obviously something he's built over his whole life. If you know his journey as a kid, he could do this stuff anyway. But I guess the point is you can look any way you want and still have, great mobility, great strength, great flexibility.
Exactly. And the biggest takeaway I can give people that are listening that will save you significant time and effort on your training journey. This is the type of information I wish that someone just absolutely slapped me over the face when I was 17, told me. Use a full range of motion at absolutely all costs. So if you're doing pull-ups, go all the way down, go all the way into the socket. If you're doing an overhead press, don't just go like this, go all the way up, use full shoulder flexion. If you use a full range of motion, that is mobility training.
Yes.
For the FitnessFAQs philosophy, it's not really about what you do. It's not about doing a X amount pull up or X amount squat. It's about doing it to a level that's challenging for you through a full range of motion. But this is difficult for people, myself included in the past. It's a big ego check. It's a lot harder to use a full range of motion and then pause, take out the stretch reflex. It's going to drop your loads considerably, but there's going to be so many benefits. You're going to put less potential wear and tear on your passive structures. You're going to stimulate more muscle growth. You're less likely to get injured. There's so many benefits to it. I think I'm going to be speaking about this for the next 10 to 15 years. It can't be said enough.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think there's also just like when it comes to range of motion as well, like I just see it from an injury prevention perspective as well. Like a lot of people go and they train really short ranges of motion, overload them, get really heavy, then they go play sport, right? It's pretty common. And they go and they snap something. Well, it's because the only range of motion you trained was, 90 degrees, whereas your leg extends to 180 degrees. They go out and they try and run, they start sprinting. They haven't done that sort of load in 10 years since high school, and that's why it breaks down.
Exactly. And it's just coming to terms with the fact that if I want to get into a deeper range of motion, my loads might be lower than what I usually use, or my reps might not be as high as I could usually perform. But that's sweet. Your body will adapt over time, and that'll become your new normal.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, how much do you give permission, I guess, for some people to say work through a little bit of pain when it comes to a rehab exercise? Now, I'd use an example with myself. When I started picking up basketball again, my knees got very trashed from just having not used them in that sort of sport for a while. And then all the damage I did doing way too much CrossFit when we were competing in CrossFit, and then started doing the knees over toes program. I'm sure you're aware of Ben Patrick. And there was some exercises where I'm like, I'm experiencing a little bit of pain here, but not so much that it's going to stop me from doing this exercise. And it wasn't making the injury worse, and it wasn't worse after the session or whatever. And if anything, a couple of days later, it was better. And it was, very unloaded. It's just kind of the body weight version of the exercise. How much, when it comes to this sort of stuff, are you giving a window, if any, to kind of work through a bit of pain?
It's a great question, because you'd have to be living in a fantasy land if you thought that you'll never experience pain or discomfort beyond regular training. my best indicator for that would be, how is it affecting your performance? If you're seriously having to drop the amount of weight that you're using due to pain or inhibition of some sort over a short-term period of a few weeks, might be time to reconsider what you're doing. But like you said, in your case, that's similar to most people, where it's not quite, muscle pain or just general fatigue. It's you're feeling something a bit different, but it's not affecting you from doing this new activity. I would say just monitor it, be aware of what's happening. But otherwise, if it's at that level and it's tolerable, then it's something that you could probably pursue and just see if your body adapts, which probably happened in your case, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it definitely adapted and it was better for it. I think that, again, the load management thing is the big one. Is like, you get into this, you build up this slow strength, and you build up, you take your time, you build up all the structures that you want to improve the different exercises. And then sometimes what can happen, if sport is the end goal, because sport is so dynamic and it's so unknown, and the gym is so slow, controlled, and so known, that if you don't bridge that gap properly with dynamic work in between in the gym, it's you go straight back to the pain level that you were at before. And that was really the lesson I learned. I got really good at all the exercises, hit all the gold standards that he wanted for all the slow strength and the controlled movements. But then when I went to go do dynamic stuff on the tendons, they still weren't ready yet.
It's a whole different world, isn't it? When you're taking things from the controlled to the uncontrolled environment, which I guess makes it easier for people that are doing more conventional gym-based training. We're fortunate in that respect. We don't have to worry about, are we going to land on someone's ankle and have a ligament injury? So that's why when you do get an injury and it's because of something that you could have controlled, maybe you shouldn't have jumped up such intensity relative to the previous week, that's when you kick yourself. But you've got to go through it to understand what your limits are.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to shift into sort of the business side of fitness FAQs. When did it go from, wow, I'm like building this massive following, now I have to do something with it, to like kind of monetizing it and choosing the path at which you wanted to, I guess, go, okay, how am I going to, not take people's money, but, what do they want to pay for here? What are they willing to pay for? Because there's so many iterations of how you could go about it. Obviously, a really common one for a lot of people is just they run ads in front of their audience. But what did you decide to do, and what are some of the processes you went through in terms of commercializing your YouTube channel?
So my Fitness FAQs channel was first started in 2010. So this was definitely the infancy of YouTube. And innocently, I just start posting, like I told you earlier, the tutorials and just responding to the feedback on that. And then over time, I found that people were asking certain types of questions. They were intrigued, I guess, by the approach to building muscle with calisthenics. So after doing YouTube for maybe 2 years till 2012, 2013, and doing the conventional AdSense advertising on the channel, I came out with my first product, or first course ebook, which was Bodyweight Evolution, a 12-week program, basically full body on how to build muscle with calisthenics exercise. So that allowed me to earn a pretty decent passive income. And I'm using quotes for those that are listening, because it's not purely passive in the respect that it will generate an income relative to the marketing that's done with it. So
yeah,
the YouTube videos generated traffic, which allowed that to happen. But over time with it, it always started in a very innocent way. So what I mean by that was I never started it like I'm going to be an entrepreneur or a boss or something like that. It was just, I'm just putting this out there because there's a need for it in the community. I get a lot of benefit and enjoyment from helping people. And like you just said, earning a decent income through it as well. But over time, I really wanted to level it up. I wanted to keep bringing out the best tutorials and really separate myself and Fitness FAQs from the other calisthenics channels. So in my eyes, I really wanted to expand my knowledge. So I went to university, I did exercise and sports science, and then afterwards I did a master's in physiotherapy so that I could really, I guess, back up with some credibility what I was saying. because there's nothing wrong with this, but it's just such a competitive world these days where getting a good physique, a lot of people have it. A lot of people can build a social media following through posting their own training, pictures themselves in, showing their six pack. Nothing wrong with that. Like I said, I'm not hating. We all do it from time to time. But I really wanted to be able to provide something more and be in the industry for a while instead of just being popular for a little bit. I really wanted to build something that would stand the test of time. So that required the non-instant gratification approach of not just doing a 12-week course. It required 5 years of university education and consistently showing up to train and improve myself physically, because this is where there's so many elements, as you could fully appreciate with what you do with My Muscle Project. It's, if people were to see what you do, they'd think, oh yeah, you're doing a podcast, but there's so much more behind it. You're learning, you're training yourself, you're trying to improve, et cetera, et cetera. Exactly the same with Fitness FAQs. If it was just my physiotherapy degree without everything else, it wouldn't be the same. If it was just me doing a planche and that was it, what do you got to offer, right? There's so many elements. So without giving you too long-winded of a story, I kept pursuing that path, kept doing YouTube and that as a hobby. I'd be doing, in-person personal training just to build my confidence with how do I coach people? How do I deal with problems? Just getting as much experience as I could whilst I was completing my physio stuff. YouTube stuff, I wasn't really serious with it. Doing it every few months. But eventually what happened was, after I graduated, I spent 2 years working as a physiotherapist while I started to take YouTube a little bit more seriously. So instead of posting every 3 months, doing it like every 1 week, every 2 weeks, having a more consistent schedule and planning things out in terms of content instead of just filming my training or something random. But eventually, after those 2 years of physio in 2018, everything was growing to a point where my income was exceeding what I was earning as a physiotherapist. And it was the natural next step to get out of the comfort zone and pursue this full time, because it's my vocation. I can help so many more people. But as, I don't know if you're in a similar position to me, but growing up in you'd say like around middle class family, you've had all the opportunities given to you. It would be very easy in that position to be comfortable. Good salary as a physio, good income with Fitness FAQs. Going into the unknown was different. So you could say that my story or the brand with Fitness FAQs wasn't like a rags to riches, came from nothing. I was in the gutter. I was filming YouTube videos. It required a clear vision of, I'm going to stop this safe path and pursue something unknown and all the responsibilities that come with it. And honestly, it was the best decision I've ever made. I mean, made connections with so many good people over the years, been able to travel the world before COVID. So sorry for everyone that didn't get to travel in 2019. I mean, hitting America, hitting Europe, teaching workshops, collaborating with some of the best people in the industry. It's been an absolute whirlwind. And where we are today with 2021, as I was just telling you off the podcast call, just moved into a 334 square meter commercial space studio, just to take things to the next level with Fitness FAQs. Got more people coming on board. It's great times.
Yeah, awesome, man. No, I respect that a lot. I think, if anyone takes anything out of this, it's the inspiration that obviously what you've achieved with your training is great, but being able to take all the principles and the learnings of what you're doing, with yourself and translating it into, a business acumen or a professional arena is always tough. And there's so many people that don't, for so many reasons, but no, definitely big respect for doing that. And I hope that anyone else listening to this, you're also inspired by that. You can get out of your comfort zone and you can pursue these things. But I think in a lot of ways, Dan, you did it in a very smart way. You made it was very calculated. It was like, all right, cool. I have physiotherapy. I've done the university degree. I've ticked a lot of boxes here. And if anything, sometimes in a way, by doing it the smart way, it gives you more reasons to not do it. It's like, well, I have option B, C, D, and E, so I'm not going to do it. Where if you only have one option, which is to make it as a YouTuber, you have to make it happen, right? But having more options sometimes can also be the reasons why you can never get started on going all in. So no, big props to going all in and pursuing it. So with the gym, is it just a content studio, or is it going to be, okay, so it's not going to be a gym, you're not going to take on clients or anything there?
No, as you know, having a small business, we really need to learn to say no and choose our direction and opportunities really wisely. So for me, having it open to the public just would not provide the return relative to our resources.
Yeah.
Because we can reach more people, impact more people, grow the business, grow the brand through the content creation. So I think the days of a brick and mortar business, especially in the last year or so, have really shown that the limitations of that, and just the ability to, from this space, be able to connect with you. You're in Sydney, I'm in Melbourne, but then this podcast is going to be listened to by people worldwide. As you know, when you look at your analytics, knowing this stuff, it's the best feeling, isn't it? It just absolutely blows your mind to know the reach for the different lives that you're being able to speak to and impact.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, you get obviously the benefit of in person, which we get from our gyms, is that obviously you have the instant gratification of, oh, that person they just finished that workout and it was a great workout, or man, they're transforming in front of my eyes. But then you're limited to only that transaction in that time at that very moment. Whereas we get so much leverage here. The downside being the only contact we get, or I guess the gratification we get, are the messages. It's the phone, the messages on our screen. Other than that, man, it's just you sitting in a room, me sitting in a room, just talking to each other, staring at screens. So if after you do it for a while, yeah, sometimes like, is there anyone out there? Am I actually doing anything? But you just have to kind of appreciate it. I guess when you do seminars and stuff, right, you get that in-person appreciation, that gratification.
Yeah, that's a great feeling. But like you said, it's only like 30 to 50 people relative to a podcast or a video, which reaches thousands and thousands of people.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we jump into the final 4 questions, what is the vision for FitnessFAQs? You're obviously in this stepping stone now. You're taking a big step with the commercial space and stuff. Is it to, launch an app, or, a course, or something that Gymnastics Body sort of did, or what is the vision that you're hoping to build?
So in the short term, just continuing to produce courses for different problems and providing solutions for people. So different mobility goals, different strength goals, different aesthetic goals, all combining that with a calisthenics approach. And so in addition to having those programs or courses, just being able to produce content just more consistently in terms of videos for YouTube, videos for Instagram, having set up pretty soon, like what you've got there, with people to come in, do podcasts. That type of stuff's going to be exciting, because as you learn from having to rent spaces and commute to different gyms or parks, there's just that, I guess, time cost of having to get there, all the logistics involved. It is just, I can't wait to unleash on this space, because I just moved in last week. So next week is going to be the first official start of producing content and all that's involved. So content creation, keep it simple. Just got to keep it simple.
Nice. Have you struggled to get gymnastics equipment into the gym?
Fortunately, I've got high ceilings, but the rig is going to be coming at the end of this month.
Oh, no, sorry. I meant actually the manufacturing. A lot of equipment's out of stock. Obviously, we've had a massive shortage. And have you struggled to get much equipment, or it's all been available?
Fortunately, I've been able to get everything I needed. But
Nice.
Like you said, there's been certain websites that were sold out of dumbbells and this. So you've had to go and hunt for different stuff.
It has become a hunt. Yeah, absolutely. That's the best way to put it. Hunting gym equipment on the internet. All right, awesome. So yeah, I mean, hopefully when borders open up, I think I'm actually in Melbourne in April, so I'll have to stop by the space. And
yeah, man, for sure.
You can obviously you can just tell me offline all the secrets to the stuff that we didn't mention on the podcast today.
Yeah, you'll come back the next episode and be jacked and unlocked all the skills. Yeah.
one arm pull-ups, one arm planches. Yeah, all that shit. Okay, awesome. So Dan, what is first question, who is someone, you would interview that is alive today, that, potentially you'd have on your podcast, really anyone in the world, and you'd ask them anything and they'd answer it openly and honestly.
So I draw a lot of inspiration from things that aren't fitness. So
Okay.
similar to yourself, we spend most of our working time researching, producing, creating content. So I guess my interest outside of this is definitely in music. So I would have to say one person stands out, Jay-Z.
Oh, nice.
So
I actually almost thought you were going to say Eminem, but Jay-Z's coming pretty close. That's good. Okay, so why Jay-Z? What would you ask him?
Jay-Z, because he's so much more than music. And that for me is hugely inspiring. So anyone that has had success in one area and then they leverage that success through just their work ethic, passion, and connecting with people is hugely inspiring. So Jay-Z is obviously stacked in that respect. Very, very wealthy man, has many businesses, and has just created something that's beyond what he started with music. So where would you start with someone like that? Yeah, that'd be an intense conversation. But I guess, how would you manage growth? How would you manage, I guess, popularity, that type of stuff that comes with that? And I guess delegating tasks, because I can imagine from what I've seen with Jay-Z, he's a very focused person. He likes to have his say in what's happening. How does he manage that with delegating tasks to get his vision out there? Would be hard to start.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard it said a few times before, but a good one for people to remember is your ability to succeed is tied very closely to your ability to grow other leaders underneath you. So you must become a great leader yourself personally, and then you must have the skill of being able to grow other great leaders from underneath you. And I think that you'll find all successful people in the world having a great ability to do that, and just kind of, I guess, multiply themselves out and their skills and their talents within other people that they have working for them or working with them. A couple of facts about Jay-Z you didn't probably know. Actually, I haven't fact checked these, but I've heard it from pretty credible sources. But apparently he's never written down a lyric in his life. He just, when it comes to the music, he goes into the booth and just plays the beats and just starts rapping them. I think Dirt Off Your Shoulder, that you can watch it on YouTube, where he actually makes the first verse. And so he's in the studio with I think it's Timbaland making the beat, and he plays it to him for the first time, and he's kind of listening to it, and then he goes, all right, I got some lyrics, and he walks in and he just raps out the whole first verse off the top of his head without writing anything down.
That's insane. So on the surface would see that and be like, that's some type of gift, but I'm sure there's been countless hours of preparation that have gone into, I guess, developing that charisma and ability to do what he does.
Yeah, absolutely. He's got a really good, I think his most recent best interview, long form, is the conversations with David Letterman on Netflix. Have you seen that one?
Yeah,
you've seen it, of course. Yeah, okay. Yeah, but for anyone else, yeah, definitely go check that out. He's he's definitely an icon. And I also legitimately think he was the first billionaire in hip hop. I think people say Dr. Dre is, but I've done some fact checking and research with it. I actually don't think Dr. Dre. I think Dr. Dre is worth $1 billion, but I think Jay-Z has actually made legitimately $1 billion before Dr. Dre. I think Dr. Dre, with the beats and stuff, he got a large chunk of that money, but he didn't get all of it. He just got the rest of it like in stocks. But he doesn't actually have it as cash money. I think that Jay-Z actually produced $1 million in revenue. $1 billion in revenue from his businesses and has it in cash. So I think that's the difference there. But someone could probably fact check us on that. But
I think you should probably fact check that.
Yeah, that's just what I heard. So if it is true, it makes him more legit than Dr. Dre in some respects. Yeah. Okay. Now that we're done frothing on Jay-Z, so second question is, what is something that you try and do each and every day, a routine, a habit, something that you feel like helps you feel successful or at least fulfilled by the end of the day?
Morning and evening, absolutely huge, because they're the most controllable elements of your day. So for me, what I value first and foremost is physical health and everything that comes with that. So first thing in the morning is when I get my training session done, because No one's calling me. No one's contacting me at 5:30, whatever in the morning. Just gives you that precious around 1 hour opportunity to do what you've got to do. So then it's not skipped and not left by the wayside. That's a given. No one's probably surprised to hear that. That's listening or knows about fitness FAQs. But what has been the most profound change for me has been the evening, in the evening. So years gone by, before focusing on more business and development and stuff like that, evenings would be spent like most people, just watching TV, documentaries, Netflix, all that stuff, or playing games. Last few years, the biggest game changer, which has probably come up podcast after podcast on this show, is reading. So reading in the evening, I try and get half an hour most days. I'm pretty consistent with the half an hour, but generally a little bit more. There's so many benefits. You learn new things. It changes your perspective on different fields. And I think most importantly for a lot of people, myself included, it helps you switch off. You know what it's like if you're scrolling social media or watching something. It's just so much more tempting and addictive. That word's probably true for a lot of people, to just keep going, keep watching something. And before you know it, sleep schedule stuffed and it goes on to the next day. But for me, reading, it's interesting enough, makes you tired, but not so interesting where you just want to go to sleep eventually.
Nice. Yeah, I think what you said, I think I have it in the reverse order. I do all my reading and stuff and emails and business stuff in the morning, because I found I'm mentally the sharpest. If I use it for training, I you lose that really productive time. And then in the evening, I do my training generally. Yeah. So, but no, both along similar principles, just obviously different methods. But tell us, what books are you reading right now? And what was the book maybe you read, maybe in the last sort of 2-3 books that you really enjoyed?
I'd say my favorite book, I guess philosophy type of book, was Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Have you heard of that one before?
Yeah, I have read it.
Yes, that's probably one of the all-time favorites. In addition to notable mentions, most people would know too, like David Goggins' book, and Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink.
Yep.
Those are notable mentions. At the moment now, I'm actually reading some fiction for the first time. Yeah, just some Harry Potter. Very random, I know, but yeah.
Nice. J.K. Rowling. Yeah, very impressive.
Shout out J.K. Rowling. What's up?
Yeah, come on the show. Okay, nice. Yeah, I recommend a book for anyone listening that I've mentioned a few times, I think on maybe some of the other shows, is Ride of a Lifetime. And that's from the CEO of Walt Disney, Bob Iger. That is as one hell of a human. So you should definitely check that out. It's got stories with like Steve Jobs, from the guy that, because Bob Iger was involved in some of the biggest acquisitions in like the movie history. So he obviously acquired Marvel, he acquired Lucasfilm, Star Wars, he acquired 21st Century Fox from Rupert Murdoch. So like huge acquisitions. But yeah, fascinating as well. And Pixar from Steve Jobs. So some really crazy stuff in there. It's definitely a good book. Easy read as well. Like a great story. And that dude, he wakes up every day at 4 and trains as well. So he's an early morning training.
Everyone's getting up earlier and earlier. It was like a few years ago, like getting up at 6 was like, man, you're committed. Now everyone's getting earlier.
Yeah. I think the rule is just get up as early as you need to get whatever you need done in time. I hate people that wake up early just to flex on how early they got up, yet they're exhausted all day. I go, well, no, I just get up as early as I need to get whatever I need done in the day done. That's really simple.
Especially in physical training, it's even more important, because people that are into fitness will be reading business stuff and they'll hear about people that are successful sleeping 4 hours, whatever. It's going to affect your cognitive capacity. We can't not argue that, but they're not having to go and do pull-ups, etc. So just keep that in mind. There is nothing wrong with getting 8 hours sleep. I get it. You probably get it as well. Sleep.
Yeah, sleep is important. Okay, and third question, is there something recently that you've changed your mind on, Dan, that for a while you held as a strong belief?
Yeah, so as you could probably gather from speaking to me for an hour, I very much so like being involved in everything with fitness FAQs, from the creation, etc. I've learnt the importance of delegating and getting other people involved. Absolutely tremendous, because as much as we like to believe we're a special snowflake and we've got a lot of knowledge and we can work hard and stuff, having outside help is absolutely huge. So my example for that is both training and business. So even though I have been doing this for a long time and I have the qualifications, getting a coach to be that, I guess, other pair of eyes, super helpful. So for me, I identified, okay, what am I not progressing with? Mobility. What am I trying to practice and preach with Fitness FAQs? That mobility module. So for the last just over a year, I've been working with a coach. I'll give him a shout out, Joachim Hilderson. Check him out on Instagram, helping me with my mobility programming, keeping me consistent, honest, and getting me to do things that I wouldn't do. So that's been something that's changed recently, as well as just getting people who are as passionate about what they do as I am with teaching calisthenics. So a big change was hiring a videographer who, like I just said, loves what he does, very creative and passionate, and giving the reins over to him to unleash what we're trying to achieve.
And isn't it amazing when you finally realize, oh, wow, they're actually better than me at doing those things?
Dude, it's a humbling experience, isn't it? Because in your mind, you're like, yeah, I can do it like that. And then they do something different in half the time with half the effort. You're like,
yeah. I think as you're learning the process of, okay, I just need to know enough so that when I go to hire someone, I know what needs to be done. And that's sort of the place you need to get to. How much do I need to know about accountings and tax? Like you just need to know the minimum so that like when you hire an accountant, you need to know that they're doing all the right things, all the basic stuff that you know, and then they'll add their expertise and more on top of that you don't have the time to learn and get good at.
100%. And that's why I love speaking with like-minded business owners that are in the fitness space, because you hear so often people that just like training and they don't focus on the other stuff. And that's why they're not around for a decade or whatever. It's because they just focus on that. And then they get taken advantage of by people and they end up purely selling herbal tea instead of building their own brand. Don't get me started.
Yeah, I think, look, it's just a whole different skill set, right? Being a coach or being someone that's good at training themselves to managing people, building a business, building business modeling, doing financial models, like planning, hiring. Like there's just so much that goes into it. And I think maybe people just didn't think that that's what, well, firstly, that's maybe not what they wanted. They didn't want to have to do these things. And then they're kind of thrust into the deep end. And so there's this natural resistance to, hey, I just got into this to like be a creator or to like just train myself. And now all of a sudden people are telling me, oh, I got to pay taxes here, or I got to hire someone to do this. And they kind of resent it a little bit. And so naturally they don't do well with it. So just having that awareness, I think, is important for what you want.
For sure. And that's why I always try and give advice to people that are on the come up to really try and work on these other aspects of their life, because as much as you like to think you're going to be at your peak, you're going to get older eventually. And there's going to be that next hungry 17-year-old who's got more time, more energy, and the ability to focus on their training more. So it's like, how can you build something or develop the skill set to last you longer than your athletic prime? But like you said, that's not for everyone. So I guess that's just a perspective that I have.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting, the professional sporting life. I'll just give a quick example for the listeners, and they're probably a lot of them familiar with this. You know, our generation, we were sort of the second generation of CrossFitters that competed in the sport of CrossFit. And it was interesting watching the generation after us come through, because CrossFit was such a new sport. When I say we were the second generation, like there was one generation of CrossFitters and we were literally the next tier. And, you know, obviously for most of the global sports right now, the first and second, third, fourth generations of these people, they're all dead, right? These sports started hundreds of years ago, if not thousands. And so it was interesting just to see how quickly they overtook us at such ease, such an early rate, you know, because they're coming in and rather than learning the snatch at 23, 24, they're learning the snatch at 12 and 14. And then they got 8 years of proper coaching, proper programming, you know, strength development, you know, even accessing your content, accessing our content, just not learning from the mistakes so quickly. It's like 100x progression rate because of just how much awareness and how much access to information that they have, and resources and tools. And and you knew it because you'd watch in these tournaments or in these competitions, you'd watch the old generation go up against the new generation, and you would go, oh, this is this athlete, and he's done this, and he's the best at this workout. He's going to win for sure. And then this kid who's 18 just absolutely blitzes him. No one's ever heard of him before, and he's just been training in his garage, and he's got all the time in the world. He just doesn't really go to school. He trains 8 hours a day, and he's super resilient because it's just, he's 18 and he's just wiping the floor with everyone. No one's ever heard of him. It's like that will happen in all fields. And so where is your longevity going to be? So that's, I guess, what we're getting towards is, the physical athleticism and the prime, it passes, and it can pass you very quickly.
For sure, especially with the amount of information and competition online these days. There's just people popping up everywhere that are doing tremendous things. It's absolutely incredible to see the bar get raised. It's humbling for content creators like ourselves because, it's a dose of reality to what people are achieving is ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Dan, last thing. In 2020, obviously there was a global pandemic. In your situation, Melbourne was definitely worse off than Sydney. What was the silver lining that came out of 2020 for you?
Like most people, it was just that time. You just had that time to really just sit with your thoughts, reflect on, I guess, past, present, and future, and just have time to really think about what you want to do. And it just affirmed that the importance of community and people, having people around you is huge, because when that's stripped away from you, honestly, nothing else matters. You could have the biggest following, you could have the most money in the world, the most status. It doesn't mean anything if you can't spend it with other people and share it with other people, which I'm sure a lot of people felt the grip of that with COVID. And Melbourne was pretty interesting, we had that big lockdown. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, it would have been good I could imagine it would have been good for your type of training, right? People have access to less equipment, probably people trying handstands for the first time. Like I saw bodybuilders that would have laughed at handstands, trying handstands for the first time because they had no way to activate their shoulders at home. So it was, I'm sure it probably did well for you.
Yeah, it was good because fortunately I built the brand over many years, and I found that a lot of people were scrambling, other business owners, to the online medium. But fortunately, all of our content and services were already online. So we were there ready to go and be a good resource for people during this time. People were swapping barbell squats for pistol squats. It was a good time, man, while it lasted.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, awesome. So Dan, what's the best place? I mean, you get the YouTube channel, you get the Instagram. Where else would you want to send people?
FitnessFAQs.com. That's awesome. The best place to get access to what we spoke about today in terms of meshing together the philosophy of strength, appearance, and mobility stuff. So FitnessFAQs.com. Otherwise, just FitnessFAQs on all social media except TikTok. Don't know about that, mate.
Nice. And I've been using a lot of your training stuff that you put out on Instagram and YouTube for some of my current training at the moment. I will give you credit. The band rotational forearm exercise has definitely been helping my golfers elbow a lot. So you have quality content. So Dan, thanks again for being on the show. We appreciate it.
Pleasure. It'd be good to have you two down here when you come to Melbourne. That'd be
absolutely.
Fantastic.
We'd love to. We'd absolutely love to. All right, Dan, thanks so much.
No worries.
Check it, I grew up, but fucking screw up. Got introduced to the game, got an ounce and fucking blew up. Chopping rocks overnight. The nigga Biggie Small trying to turn into the Black Frank White. We had to grow dreads to change our description. 2 cops is on the milk box missing. Showed they toes, you know they got